the Sonic the Hedgehog movie franchise. This is a project that honestly is sometimes the highlights of the movie I'm looking forward to the most each year. And I have covered these movies all the way across the timeline, so today I'm putting them all bashed together. Be it a review of the first movie, a cutscene breakdown from Sonic Unleashed, handling the side story of the Knuckles series, or our latest opinions on Sonic 3, here is a little bit of coverage of 1, 2, 3, the actual games, and the TV series, all put in chronological order for your viewing experience. Come and enjoy our full coverage of the Sonic movie saga. The Sonic movie, probably the most iconic film to come out so far in 2020. Though that's not really saying much considering it's still February. It doesn't need to do much to be outstanding, and it doesn't. This movie is bland. It's really, really bland. It's great! I hate so many elements of this Sonic movie. I love this movie. This movie is far from mediocre, yet it has every mediocre trick in the book. It's to the point that I would argue it's everything except mediocre. It's really, really good, and it's really, really bad. There is no middle ground, but mashed together, it's an enigma. It's the most boring film imaginable with the most outstanding eye candy to bump it up. Needless to say, I'm pretty confused. I came into this film pretty confused anyway. After seeing that first draft of the trailer, I think we were all preparing for a great dumpster to roast our marshmallows on. But then, with the redesigns, suddenly everything was lining up. The trailer seemed to highlight a funnier story, and yet surely a redesign can't fix the terrible writing from the first one. I had no idea what to expect going in. But apparently, the answer to everything was I was overthinking it. Cause this movie takes a beeline simple approach to its entire premise. This movie is charming when Sonic stuff's on screen, and bland when it's not the focus. But to tell properly how all of this comes together, let's go through the Sonic movie piece by piece. Don't worry, this will be spoiler free up to a point, but I'll let you know when we reach that figure point. So I went into the cinema screening twice, first surrounded by a handful of kids and their families, and then a second time with a bigger, more mixed audience, and the two had some slightly different reactions to the film. So for a start, I asked the question, what is the actual target demographic for the film? Because by all accounts, I certainly don't think it was me. This is the reboot origin tale of early Sonic the Hedgehog. The series hadn't aged with me yet, so clearly the primary angle is kids. Baby kids. Young, dumb, impressionable kids that don't know what makes something good. And that shows. This film is plastered with dumb moments that pander to the IQ of a 4-year-old. What are all the traits of a young, dumb film we all hate? List them off! We hate fart jokes, we hate pointless, cheap shots disguised as jokes, and my god do we hate flossing. It's all there, multiple times. Sonic lets one rip, and I kid you not, that second mixed audience audibly vocalized, "Oh, come on." You could hear multiple people grumbling about it. And the flossing? Guess what the kids from the first showing said? Nothing. They didn't laugh. They didn't even giggle. They were done with it. It wasn't funny anymore. This joke has been beaten to death for almost 4 bloody years. And these writers and producers, or whoever puts in this list of tropes that must be featured, should be fired and put to rest. The second audience audibly groaned, and they had to go through it twice. In fact, it was like the people knew that this was a bad element, because even the marketing team edited around it. You know that dance Sonic does at the end of the truck destruction scene in the trailer? Yeah, well, that dance is actually just plotted in just for the trailer. In reality, Sonic does that exact dance when getting a new pair of shoes. At the truck, he's actually flossing. They literally swapped out the dancing animations because of how bloody stupid they knew it would be. But there it is in the film. Twice. But yeah, okay, fine. This is a kids movie. It's gonna have baby kid movie tropes. Whatever. What's the secondary demographic? Well, obviously, it's the parents. And there's some adult jokes in there that would fly over kids' heads, but they're not sexual by nature or anything like that. They're political. When you think the Sonic movie, what do you expect to be the very first reference if it's not a Sonic reference? Well, the answer is actually the Civil War. Odd choice, I know. Then there's also political emails and The Rock being president. Things that I wouldn't exactly say are funny, but are attempts at reaching a little older. But either way, those jokes pretty much all fell flat, in my opinion, and it certainly feels forced. And then most other jokes are just bad. Hey, you just said your name is Robotnik, but I'm gonna feign ignorance and call you Robotskis, because I'm gonna stretch the idea that a 3-syllable name is too complex. But you know, maybe that's a Sonic thing himself. He's awfully chatty, and he's the one that brings up most of these pop culture references, and that's fair. Although the games picture him more as a rebellious and teenage angsty kind of guy, this rendition of him has him more innocent and enthusiastic, childish, and fun to watch. And really, I didn't hate that. It does work quite well for Sonic, and it's still early days, so maybe he'll grow his brooding angst over time. Though the writing for all of these pop culture references really feel like the writers just scrolled through Reddit to pick out the most popular thoughts. Calling raccoons trash pandas, or idolizing Keanu Reeves. It just all felt a little out of place, you know? But enough of that, let's actually start on the story, or at least the prologue. It's not spoilers yet, it's literally just the first 5 minutes. So Sonic's origin was fast, blazing through in record time. I kinda liked how the pacing didn't drag it out, but it was certainly one of the most interesting parts considering how alien it all was. But hey, I guess full-blown animation's expensive. There's a new motherly character with Longclaw the Owl, and that's cool, but I especially liked how the baddie tribe that was after Sonic were all echidnas, reminiscent of the tribe from Sonic Adventure. Felt a lot more Sonic-y once they appeared. The new lore logic of rings all being portals to other dimensions was also pretty interesting to see, and connects to how the 2D Sonic games actually work with teleporting to bonus levels. Fun fact, one of the planets Sonic has on his map is also the checkered bonus level planet of red and blue balls. I love those kind of referential attention to details. And Sonic appearing on Earth just makes me think of Sonic X. Good stuff. It immediately has us interested from the very beginning and only really makes me want to see more of that side of the Sonic world. But then we come to the humans and things suddenly feel a little lackluster. Let's be honest, we're here for Sonic, and the story tells us that Sonic just stays in hiding for 10 years. Alright, maybe the baby Sonic thing really was a marketing ploy. It's the small town of Green Hills, Montana, so no wonder he hasn't been spotted, I guess. But to progress the plot, the film goes back to that baby talk approach again by almost sounding like a pantomime with its dialogue. So Sonic is finally feeling alone, apparently for the first time in 10 years. And how do we know? Well, it's just because he says it really overtly. Man, I really am lonely. Oh no, what am I going to do? Oh no, they're here. They found me. I better go somewhere else to use this immediate teleportation device instead of using the actual, immediate teleportation device. It all felt very stupid and like I was expected to be for any time the plot wanted to move forwards. Like, don't get me wrong, I loved all of the pieces in between the plot moments. Sonic saving animals, that's kind of his thing, or seeing Sonic reading through all the Flash comics, or Crazy Carl showing off that crappy Sonic design meme. That was all great. I mean, what do you think the odds are he'll be reading all of the Quicksilver bits in a sequel? But at the same time, the actual story beats were about as flat as you could make them, and the writing to piece it all together was, well, just poor. The government gets involved to find this alien creature. He's found by the protagonist and they scream at each other. That's new. But don't worry, they fixed it this time. They revoiced the, meow line. Okay. They go on the run together, do kooky scenes along the way, and become buddies with morals by the end. It's all just exactly what you'd expect, which is seriously disheartening for something as interesting as Sonic. And Sonic is interesting. But even on his front, the film decided to take every trope they could and just blended it with him, not really letting him shine as his own thing. What's Sonic's defining trait? Well, he's fast. So remember every fast character trope from every other movie? It's there. Sonic slows down time and does his own thing to a musical number? Got it. Sonic bounces around the room doing everything at once from our perspective? There it is. Sonic takes something slow and rushes super fast with it as its cheeks go flapping in the wind? We got that too. The only thing missing is the mid-2000s trope of the fast character drinking coffee or eating sugar to get a supreme speed rush, or maybe Dash running on water in The Incredibles. Though actually, I have more things to mention about these slow-mo scenes. 2 qualms and 1 really good point. That 1 good point though is a spoiler, so you have to wait for that one later. But those 2 qualms? They're nitpicks really, but I'm gonna voice them anyway. This is my opportunity, okay? So the slow-mo room scene in the bar, right, is clearly just following through those Quicksilver moments from X-Men, right? Sure, but there's one key detail that really pulls it all together in those films that Sonic completely misses. And that is that time is actually moving in the Quicksilver scenes. By doing that, it shows his speed against reality, and that's fantastic. In Sonic's, clearly they're just copying because the scene completely stops, and that to me ruins the immersion. Sure, it's easier to do and no one really cares, but this tells us that Sonic is doing everything absolutely instantly. And on top of that, he does his 3 places at once trick during that time stop moment, which is just so beyond fast that it's practically insulting to me. At the very least, it was a cool detail that he ran out of his clothes and then returned to them by the end. And it's a shame, because there are moments of really cool direction. Like when he's circling the baseball court, there's a shot of him in one place creating a full run cycle frame by frame at every loop, like a Zoe trope. That's outstanding. But then there's all this generic list ticking that clearly doesn't put in the effort and is simply harvesting the profits of a formula. I was breastfed actually. Nice. Oh, and that other slow-mo qualm? A missed opportunity in Direction 2. When Sonic drums away the bullets, it plays a sound, but it totally should be a Sonic motif. Come on, there's so much Sonic music to use, and barely anything was. No, really, that whole Sonic soundtrack is just boring orchestral crap. Just background slush of whatever fits the screen. And I don't like that. This is Sonic the Hedgehog you're talking about here. A character with his own iconic soundboard. There are a whole 2 Sonic tracks across the entire movie from what I could hear. There's one directly ripped from Sonic Mania at the prologue opening, and then there's a gentle epiloguing piano version of Green Hills at the very end. Those 2 I love. Absolutely amazing. But where was everything else? It was to the point that I almost thought that there were hidden song lyrics in the dialogue, like maybe Sonic was mumbling "Can you feel the sunshine" in his sleep, or saying "We're just living by our own rules," which is slightly off, but still. It turned out it was just me probably being paranoid. But at least we gotta go fast. Sega's new logo was great, though we all want to hear the words being said again, and the Paramount logo with the ring sound effects was mwah. But what about Robotnik's theme? Not even a hint of any of the original tracks he's had. Oh, but we've got Queen's Don't Stop Me Now. I mean, it's a great song, but it's just more generic fodder for a generic audience and a lackluster soul behind it. You've got a talented musical production, why don't you use it for something more than slush? But hey, let's talk about something good briefly. Robotnik! Jim Carrey was a good bunch of fun, and presumably had a lot of fun on set. I adored those moments where that classic Robotnik voice eeped out, like when he was grunting or laughing, and it really gets that sense of progressing into the madman. Maybe could have done with more of a smooth transition though, as it very much felt like a couple of leaps ahead, but hey ho. And his machines were fun to see, especially the Matryoshka doll style of them. It had their iconic red eye beam, but man, I just wanted to see his logo once. It's only in the stylized credits. Also, his name? Robotnik! Great choice, that is his origin. And Eggman is just a nickname Sonic gave him for looking like an egg, you know, because he's bald. Oh no. Sonic called him Eggman before he shaved his head, didn't he? Why would you do that? That makes no sense. There were even easier explanations he could have used, like, "My Robotnik, your machines look like eggs. What are you, the Eggman?" Like, it's even half hinted with him saying, "Look what came out of my egg set." Damn it. His assistant character was a new addition that wasn't all that bad. I particularly liked the latte joke. Shame it was in the trailer. Actually, pretty much everything was in the trailer. No, really, I think there was a shot from every single scene in the movie except for a handful, like the human ones or one particular moment we'll mention later. To me, it really took something out of it, because I was expecting many of the beats because I'd seen it before. That's some poor marketing there, but hey, they got my money, so I guess they're satisfied. Speaking of characters, protagonist was protagonist. It's kind of normal. I know his name's Tom or whatever, but this isn't even his first time discovering an animated character, so he's just protagonist to me. Everyone else kinda sucked. Multiple guys were useless foundation for other characters, like Army Guy and his army, who were never used or seen again, or Sister-in-Law, who's angry for comedic purposes at the guy who's a popular cop with an aspiration to do bigger things and save a life. How unlikable, right? Like, what's her cause for her hatred? Just generic annoying fodder and a trope of a character? At least she had her moments. And even protagonist's partner, she's nice, but her appearance in the third act? Pointless. She doesn't do anything. Kind of a waste having her there. Was it literally like a diversity thing for the trailer? But hey, a perfectly normalized interracial relationship in the center of a kids movie? Thumbs up from me. I realized I did enjoy the movie more the second time around, and the elements that were and weren't used makes for a lot of good potential. But there's still a lot of crap going on. Like, why does Sonic only drop one quill throughout the entire movie? Why does Robotnik speak that one line in Japanese randomly? Why was the baby in the bag gag just kinda dropped with no consequences? How did no one recognize Sonic? Sure, I'll believe it, but even the fugitive who's been all over the news everywhere? Even when approaching a whole new stranger, nobody knew who he was. Was the comment about who wants all your friends to be mushrooms a sneaky dig at Mario, as well as plot receptive? Cool. Why was there so much product placement, and why couldn't it be tastefully done visually and not interrupting the dialogue? Were they really that money hungry? How did they not notice the tower drones? Why do these protagonists never stress over the government chase or running away from their partner? How many people died on the streets from Robotnik's fire? Why does no one actually react to Sonic's super speed? Protagonist sees it first by the car, no response, and the partner kinda does, but freaks more out about the alien aspect than the super speed. It was like it was a forgotten trait to be surprised by because, come on, it's Sonic. Everyone knows he's fast. No, they don't! Not in this world! What? How could you look over that part? But before we leap into spoiler talk and sequel thoughts, first I'll just say this. This movie is far from perfect. In fact, it's pretty generic and sloppy. But all of the Sonic elements are outstanding elements on their own. The movie structure and formula is basic and bland, whilst the Sonic stuff is fun to see, even if played awfully safe. Together, I wouldn't say it's mediocre, just great and terrible at the same time. And honestly, I get it. This is hoping to be a whole new franchise, and to do that, it needs to have a sturdy foundation. So it played things as safe as it could. From here, the series can jump so much further and take so many more satisfyingly successful risks. Many first films are surprisingly simple, and this is yet another case, hopefully. It's certainly doing well at the box office. I would be super excited to see more content from Sega and Sonic, and despite all of my negatives, I would hail this as the second best video game movie adaptation so far. Detective Pikachu was simply much less generic, but Sonic 2 could easily overthrow it if it just took more risks with Sonic. Let's see if this franchise is more than just cash grabs and can put a little elbow grease passion into its IP. But no, now we're gonna dive into the endgame stuff, where there's a lot more good and a good chunk more bad incoming. So if you care about spoilers, now's your time to hop out and come back later, alright? So, I can't believe Sonic evolved into Ike, Mr. I fight for my friends over here. No, but really, I was surprised by the obvious Eastern influence on this film's endpoint. Obviously, many of these producers were Japanese, as that is Sonic's source, but the moral of don't reach for your individual dreams and go for staying back with your family was not something I expected. Kind of un-American, but hey, it happens. Shame though, I mean, if you think about it. With family in San Francisco and that place being a location, you know what kind of adaptations could make an appearance? Oh yeah, Sonic Adventure 2. Boarding and grinding scenes could all make a fantastical appearance. And speaking of more Sonic references, I was super happy with what we didn't cover. There was still plenty of other Sonic features that could have room to be explored in the future. Sonic's hatred of water being one of them, but there's also other gimmicks like his friends, Chaos Emeralds, other dimensions, maybe springs, light speed dashing and homing attacks. Though I guess you could argue that that last one actually made an appearance by the end of the film. Though this new addition of him having practically supersonic powers just from emotional outbursts is also pretty interesting to see how it'll progress. But before we lean into the super sequel post-credit stuff, some final points on what was in the movie. Sonic's raw feet. That was important. Sonic had a hint of teenage angst with his dialogue in that epilogue, and that was nice to see. And the moment with his new room was sweet, until Sonic flossed a second time. That dog joke from the trailer was clearly all they had with him, because then they used that exact same one again. The French scene was really stereotypical. Robotnik says pyramids are one of the 7 wonders, but then proceeds to shoot it up. How did the protagonist accurately use the portal to connect to the mushroom world? He's only heard of it before. The government element kind of wrapped up too nicely, don't you think? Like, they were happy that their hired gun was vanquished. Seeing Robotnik break even supersonic speed was super cool. I love that moment of the slow-mo subversion, though we'd totally get whiplash, as would several characters in this film. And then there was the post-credit scene. You know how I mentioned the trailer had a shot from every scene? Yeah, it really bothered me that one of those shots included the post-credit scene of Robotnik on the Mushroom Planet. Literally, the build-up to the sequel was in the trailer for the first film. It was the piece that intrigued me into watching it all, and it was a lie. Thumbs down, movie. But hey, it was nice that in that scene, while Agent Stone had inexplicably disappeared from before the climax, he was recreated on the Mushroom Planet. Also, Robotnik sounds much more Robotnik-like. That's the voice I've been wanting to hear this whole time. Also, him recreating the walk cycle of the Death Egg at the end, very snazzy foreshadowing right there. But no, the real kicker is the second post-credit scene. I saw it from a mile away, but didn't tweet about it because I wanted to save any Sonic talk for this video. That was stupid. I predicted it from like day 3 of the first trailer. Another portal opens up and out springs Tails the Fox, searching for Sonic and flying across the forested lands of Green Hills. Mwah! I mean, and he's fast. Fantastic. His design is absolutely incredible. Far better than Sonic any day, and it opens up so many more ideas for the potential sequel. But man, I'd love to see the original design, presuming the bad Sonic rendition wasn't some next level marketing ploy to dig into Sonic's ironic enjoyment. Still, Tails in the sequel? Hell yes! Seeing more of Sonic's world is the best part. And what more leans into it? It certainly feels like Sonic X now. We can hear more of characters from Sonic's past. Bump it up again with maybe Knuckles gliding through for a trio movie. What if it starts with those tribes still after Sonic, with Knuckles being one of them until flipping sides? Or who else would be marketed for the sequel? Obviously, Shadow is the next most marketable character, but would they really go there already? There's really so many options for this franchise now, is that the only way is up from here. Tails and Sonic cooperation, other Sonic gimmicks we have yet to explore, Eggman returning as an actual Eggman voice, robot and all, and who knows the potential for other characters and where their plotlines could continue. Perhaps we'll see more of Longclaw too. Either way, by the end of this film, I was absolutely ecstatic. This film is watered down and boring, but it's Sonic in a whole new light, literally glowing, and I hope this was a boring foundation for the sake of playing it safe for a future franchise. And from here, the series can really bloom into something fantastic to witness. For now though, I'll just watch the trailers again when I want to rewatch the film. It practically spoiled the whole film anyway, and is only really missing Tails and Robotnik's super speed mode. Otherwise, I'll just wait for the sequel. Sonic 2 released yesterday here in the UK, though I hear you've still got a week to wait in the US. So here's an alternative option for you all. It's the cancelled Sonic movies. I know it's a running gag to mention how Sonic had such a rough translation to 3D, but getting on the big screen was an effort foiled multiple times. So we're gonna talk about it today. Thank you to the Nostalgia Teen 64, Jared and Terry for suggesting this, and Fast Isaiah and R War Club contributing notes in the Discord channel. As usual, sources are linked down in the description. Starting off, we're jumping right the way back to 1993 with a movie titled Sonic the Hedgehog, Wonders of the World. With Sonic literally just being 2 years old, the variety of source material was much more limited back here, but the prowess of the character still had a monumental presence on television screens. In game form, we had just Sonic 1 and 2 and CD, but in TV show form, we already had 2 adaptations with The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, as well as Sonic the Hedgehog. That's not confusing to follow at all. This is the one I hear all sorts of people raving about from time to time. It's the one with Sally in it. Sat AM, I believe it's called. I know the former much better. This is my Sally.
Why don't you float down a river and get lost at sea?
Anyway, this rendition of Sonic the Hedgehog also sparked the very freshly new creation of the comics, Sonic the Hedgehog. These are actually known as the Archie comics, so at least I can follow that. With 290 issues to their name by the end, their first full-length issue of the comic was published in July 1993. So it's all just coming to a head back here. So what do they do with such an open prompt with all of this potential? Well, production-wise, our main protagonist is Michaelan Risley, the freshly appointed consumer products director at Sega of America, previously handling work for Disney, Amblin, and Mattel, and as vice president of production for Marvel's animation unit, until hired here. Now, she is a powerhouse at Sega, coming in when Sega was at less than 4% market share, creating the Sega Task Force to address lost opportunities of creating games for girls, and expanding the female market share from 3% to 20% when she left 2 years later. She and her team are the reason Sonic the Hedgehog turned around into a billion-dollar consumer products brand. Anyway, she turned around in 1993 and pitched the idea of a Sonic the Hedgehog movie to several Hollywood producers. I was basically driving the Sonic movie. I don't know who came up with the idea, whether it was Tom or Shinobu or me, or we talked about it as a group, but having come from the movie world, I was always pushing those things. And the boardroom seemed pretty split on the idea, with the Sega of America CEO Tom Kalinske being wary of damaging the brand. Understandably so, as in the 90s, video game movies were just starting and they weren't so hot. Tom himself even cited Street Fighter and Super Mario Bros. As big examples of why this is such a bad idea. Also, Masters of the Universe damaging their toy line too. Stating later in interviews, there really is that fear that a bad movie could potentially hurt your brand. The Sonic brand was strong enough to probably withstand it, but there is that fear. Sega was enthusiastic anyway, and so development began during the production of Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, which was also airing at the same time as the other Sonic the Hedgehog show. Can you believe that they successfully managed to broadcast 2 Sonic shows at the same time? Or that the company commandeering the adventure show was literally called
Geek.
My goodness. Anyway, by August 1994, Sega struck a development deal, co-producing alongside MGN and Trilogy Entertainment Group, and crew members started coming together. Enter Richard Jeffries, an associate of Risley from her old Marvel comic days. He was set with the task of drafting up a treatment for the entire film, and had some crossover tick boxes to also tackle. As during the year 1994, Sega was doing things in the gaming sphere. Wow, what a surprise! As they were developing Sonic X-treme. You seen this gameplay before? Yeah, you've probably seen this footage before. A great sign, as you may know now, this game was never released, but nobody knew in 1994, and it was set for Sega's very next console, the Sega Saturn. And this movie was the perfect opportunity to be a tie-in with the new game and console. Try to coordinate the two and make the two compatible, as Jeffries described it. I don't know why he speaks like that. So, loop around to May 1995, and Jeffries submitted his idea, and it goes in some weird directions. Remember that one time the Game Grunts reacted to strange Sonic comics?
Sonic in your face. Whoa.
Yeah, this is basically that. Sonic comes careening out of the TV screen at one point. I'll give you the quick synopsis, as there's actually like 700 words of description. This doesn't follow a sheriff man in his 30s, it follows a 12-year-old kid. And yes, this was a live-action animated hybrid, describing the two would-be friends as 3D guys in the real world. Would be interesting to see how that tech would have worked out in the 90s, but apparently Jeffries checked with my friends in the visual effects industry, and we figured out a way to make it more practical to make CG characters in the real world. So, it may be our real reality, though the kid's reality's not the greatest. Being hounded by his teacher for not finishing his essay on Sonic the Pilot, who apparently died breaking the speed barrier? This never comes back. And at home, his parents are divorced, but there's a silver lining. Josh, the kid's name is Josh, has a dad who's invented the XRI, an artificial intelligence computer. And after plugging a Sega Saturn and playing Sonic X-treme into it, Sonic comes jumping out of the screen and into the real world, followed by Eggman. And hijinks ensue. The apartment gets trashed, they run along rooftops, wrecking all the cars in traffic and scaring little girls on the street. Also, Sonic is progressively getting weaker the longer he stays in reality. The Chaos Emerald is what's needed to bring Sonic his energy back, and they exist in the real world, hidden in rocks. Is it really going to be an easy task excavating all of... Meanwhile, Eggman has set up an amusement park, Botnik Land, and plans to use the Chaos Emeralds to take over the world. With capitalism. Also turning humans into bully bots, but is a minor thing. Sonic and Josh get the emeralds and trace back to Eggman and discover that he can use the XRI to digitize the wonders of the world. Hey, it's the title. Like Mount Everest and the Amazon rainforest. Also, he's making a virtual reality ride. Ever the entertainer, I guess. And everything at the park is free. All because it turns out kids who ride the ride are actually turned into robotic slaves, like all the animals in the classic Sonic games. By the way, since you've reached the halfway mark, do consider subscribing or check out all of our other links. Alright, moving on. And these newly named Kinda Bot kids are complete nightmare fuel. See, they will return home to their houses, right? And do everything their parents say. They'd even go so far as to eating all their veggies and doing their homework too. Disgusting! Josh, of course, is horrified and uses Sonic as bait to lure Eggman back into Sonic Extreme, but also gets sucked in himself. Sounds like a win-win to me. And here the final showdown takes place. Sonic and Josh versus Eggman. And somehow the two heroes win. Josh goes through the vortex back to the real world and Sonic stays behind to continue to fight Eggman. The dad puts away the XRI, stating it's too dangerous and unsafe to ever use again, and the film ends with a cheeky wink from Sonic before returning to his business in Sonic Extreme. Never to be seen again in reality, or reality. I tell you what, that's not an awful plot. I always liked the archaic story of entrapment inside of a robot from the early games, and teaming up with a kid makes a lot more sense than an adult. And it worked for Sonic X. Man, now that show was my childhood. And I think the biggest gripe would have been the actual format. I mean, Extreme Sonic looks pretty choppy being so early 3D, so translating that to live action would be tough. And you know, the draft was received pretty positively among MGN and Sega executives. However, there was one naysayer, the Sega COO, Shinobu Toyoda, who suggested Kalinske replace Robotnik with a meaner villain instead. Why? Well, because they thought that the story being about Sonic fighting Robotnik would be not new to Sonic fans. What a terrible idea. Kayleen Risley didn't agree, of course. She's the powerhouse of Sega, stating Robotnik was a great villain in the animated series and the games, and Richard Jeffries agreed, but speculated that they were probably trying to develop a new bad guy for the games. And soon enough, MGN pulled out, cancelling the project where it stood. Jeffries was given permission to shop the script around, and he contacted DreamWorks about animating it, but since Sega wanted a large sum of money for the rights to the character, and DreamWorks wanted to use a low-priced idea to breathe new life into, they weren't interested. Why MGM dropped out in the first place? I've heard several excuses from different sources, so who knows? Some say it was Sega and MGM demanding a higher share of the profits, like 75%, while Penn Densham, who are you? Oh, executive producer of the whole thing, alright, said it followed creative differences between Sega and Trilogy. It could have also been from the troubles brewing from the decline of the 16-bit console market, or the crazy budget of $150 million at a guess. All sorts of conflicts were abound. I don't know when exactly it happened, but I got a call from my agent to say MGN and Sega couldn't come to an agreement on a corporate level that would work for them. It wasn't gonna work out, and they were gonna pay me off, and I thought, gee, that's too bad.
That's no good.
Because it's a really good idea. And so it was cancelled in 1995 before production could even begin, as was Sonic Extreme. But that's not the end of the Sonic movie saga, as there were more. Much less detailed than this example, so let's jump ahead to the year 1996. Seriously, just one more year? This one's a technicality, as in Japan there were a couple OVA episodes released with this very aesthetically pleasing Sonic design. And eventually in 1999, North America got their release of it, with the OVAs bunched together and packaged as Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie. Actually released and enjoyable too. Sweet. But it's not the real deal. So now we reach the early 2000s and the 2002 project. And now we have a new protagonist of our story, the one Ben Hurst, writer for both SatAM and Sonic Underground. Man, Sonic has a lot of adaptations. Anyway, in 2002, he consulted Dick Entertainment about managing an animated Sonic film to serve as a continuation to the Sonic the Hedgehog TV series with him as writer. Because after 2 seasons of SatAM, the show was cancelled on a cliffhanger due to waning views. And if the internet's anything to go by, the show's now become an absolute cult classic. But the motivation to make more was here, this early, even in 2002. And so steps were taken, and Hearst was contacted by Ken Penders, writer of the Archie comics, to hear all of Hearst's plans. Now this guy, well, I'll be honest, I'd never heard of this guy before researching this video, but he's got quite the rabbit hole to him. Copyright lawsuits and Sonic characters with sex lives and shameless redirecting conversations of war onto himself and his project literally the day I'm writing this. Well, he sounds like a right stand-up guy. I'm sure he won't be much of an antagonist on Ben Hearst's project. Oh, it's dead. See, the tale goes that Penders, after hearing this strategy, then turned around to Sega, claiming that Hearst was trying to co-opt the whole franchise, leading Sega to dismiss Hearst and his proposal entirely, and subsequently stomping on any chance of Sad AM getting its true ending. I don't know if it's because of this exactly, or all the other dramas he keeps spouting out on Twitter, but from what I understand, pretty much everyone in the Sonic fandom antagonizes him. Well, at least we don't have to talk about him anymore. The Ken Penders project. Oh, bloody hell. Yup, this was just a stepping stone for Penders as he stomped on the opportunity to spin his own concept for a Sonic film in September 2003, titled Sonic Armageddon. In his own words, the movie would have been an origin story and a series reset, resolving the plot threads that began in the animated Sonic show. Oh, good. And continued in the Archie comic series. And being a creative himself, he was able to produce some artwork for the project. Oh my, no! He's the guy who draws the cursed Sonic arc. Look at this! Planets destroying, duplicate-looking characters, Eggman! Needless to say, it was intended to be much darker, with home planets being destroyed and robotization being much more gruesome than in the cartoon. But it would have confirmed Sonic and Sally as an official couple. Like a real piece of fanfiction. Oh, there's even a trailer for it too.
They said it was just a video game.
Yeah, okay, I think I've seen enough. Oh, there's a poorly produced animatic in it too? This was a real video pitched to Sega? Apparently they were interested, but at this time Sonic X was airing. Hell yeah! And they didn't want to show and a movie out at the same time with different continuities. And in 2007, it was dropped entirely. Phew. This time due to corporate upheavals and the death of Sega licensing manager Robert Leffler, who was a supporter of Penders. And so, it passed. Then in 2012, another prompt popped up, with the creator of Sonic, Yuji Naka, accidentally leaking production. They were visiting Marza Studios one day and commented, "It looks like they're working on a Sonic movie." Though it turned out nothing came of it. But Marza Studios are the guys behind many Sonic game cutscenes, so it's probable this is what he was commenting on. These guys are the ones behind Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Riders, Sonic Lost World, and that one short, Sonic and the Night of the Werehog. Honestly, some of the best looks Sonic's ever had in an animated form, if you ask me. But alas, not a movie. Which finally brings us round to 2013, when Sony Pictures Entertainment acquired the rights to produce and distribute a Sonic film. Set to be a live-action animated hybrid film, it was announced on June 10th, 2014, and then Sony got hacked. It's the massive email scandal. There are loads of interesting emails cropping up, including the senior vice president of Sony Pictures calling it Sonic the Hedgehog, but then distribution switched hands. All the crew members assigned to Hedgehog stayed the same, actually, now being taken under the wing of Paramount Pictures, and, well, the rest is history.
Meow?
Technically, the Sony version is its own beast, but it turned around in the end. And that's the skimmed history of Sonic's adaptation to the big screen. There's all sorts of other bits I avoided from poor sources and murmurs, and hey, these days we're eating good with the comedic Sonic Boom Show and the pleasing designs of the Sonic Mania Adventure series. Or just all the high quality cutscenes we get from the games. Sometimes. But what a tale. Everyone would eventually go in their own separate ways. Ken Penders suing Sega in an attempt to claim his Archie comic characters and ranting at people on Twitter. Ben Hearst unfortunately died of complications relating to diabetes in 2010, and Michaeline Risley would go on to become a global activist, fighting against child abuse and trafficking. In 2019, she was thrown in prison in Zimbabwe, receiving death threats and had to flee in a separate event when her vehicle was hijacked by a gang of traffickers. What? Forget Sonic! This is the symbol of a real hero, and she helped with the delivery of PPE across the US in 2020? That's a wild ride from start to finish. What an inspiration! And on that note, my name's been Daz. You didn't really care. Sonic Movie 2's a thing. And I'll see you all in a bit. Oh my god, what a story. The new Sonic movie's here, but no matter how good it is, it will never live up to Sonic at his absolute prime. This is his absolute prime. Welcome back everyone to the cutscene series, where we dissect the very best of video game cutscenes, as they too are getting just as cinematic as real cinema. Today we're covering a scene that has kept with me for many years. It's the opening introduction to Sonic Unleashed. I mean, this is just the toppest of tiers. I don't think Sonic will ever top this sequence right here, but let's get into it. We start with a simple fade in on Earth, the calm before the storm as we are introduced to our villain. The music interrupting the piece with an orchestral cacophony in one of the best renditions of Dr. Eggman's themes we've ever heard. You hear Eggman before you see him, the great Mike Pollock, looking and sounding so crispy, and an evil laugh fitting for such a cartoon character. All of this shot being built to demonstrate the scale of this set, as we see Eggman twist into view at a low camera angle, bolstering him up whilst keeping him dramatic. And now the camera zooms and fades to the other end of the ship, like a super zoom. Sonic silhouetted against the fire first, icon before character. He's designed with shapes in mind after all, and the music changes to a build-up. We all know what's coming. Damn, he's shiny. With a dramatic turn of the camera, we still don't see his face, but his other features first, as he looks at the distant goal. Kinda looking like that one level from Sonic Heroes. It's a gameplay adaptation. But first, his hurdle is... again, giving us a kind of camera zoom for that handheld, rushed and energetic feel to see those super shiny robots. And in universe, they give them some low angle lighting. Very evil. A classic technique. Before pulling back to reveal more robots in the foreground. Again, to show scale as a miniature surprise reveal. And though this is a pretty functional shot, thematically this acts to tell us a bit about these two characters. We can see that Sonic is viewed as a real threat needing so much firepower, and this Eggman knows, implying the history between them. And Eggman again being as cartoony and physical as possible. And so they do, shown as a side angle on the right, shooting left as villains tend to do. And Sonic here's just looking good, the music kicking into gear in sync with the action. So simple. God, don't you miss the days when Sonic levels did the same? Anyway, he's so fast he jumps ahead of the camera and into that juxtaposing side angle, running to the right just like the games. And he's got that squash and stretch, an animation technique that demonstrates motion that Sonic for some reason has often been quite rejective of. His face being so horizontal to really show that forward momentum. Again, focusing on his features, all equally as iconic from his design. And since this isn't a 2D game, he can swerve on the Z-axis from distant to up close. Truly swift. But we don't lose track of him thanks to that color palette. Him being the only blue on top of an orange backing means you're always able to track him with your eye, as they're opposites on the color wheel. And the camera pans to his next pathing. A Sonic that the camera can't keep up with is so dynamic. It almost seems like a no-brainer. And so Sonic next shows off his new and improved spin jump attack, camera following behind him almost like a perspective shot before swinging around to the other side, like a half rotation of fluidity compared to where Sonic first started. And then, a brief moment of calm. It's the cool, radical skater shot Sonic's kept along with. In this moment, he's enjoying it. This is child's play to him. And he's laid on top of the twinkling space like a festival fireworks show. A beautiful, conscious decision someone made anyway. And now we follow back to his run. Camera dashing ahead, but low to the ground to highlight all that added speed. Ooh, the adrenaline. And then, bam! Our first slow-mo shot. The fast speed is great for dynamics, but now after some distance, we're getting close up. And again, that super shiny lighting is to die for. Lens flare in the background and all, and a clear indication of what's going on. All with a flare of violin in the music. The robot's slowly punching downwards. It's a single dodged attack, but super close to hitting as well. Also, I personally like that Sonic is also in slow-mo here. He's still going fast, he hasn't just frozen time, we're just able to actually perceive it properly for once. Though of course, I still love those classic Quicksilver scenes the movie was influenced off. I guess it really is the difference between more modern Western cinematic inspirations and the Eastern approach covered by the animators here. as this short was produced by Masa Studios, a Japanese animation company. They work on all the later Sonic game cutscenes. And with these as the end result, you can probably see why. But then we come to a mid-shot, now at normal speed. Sonic a blue blur, but easy to navigate thanks to his trail. And the camera also spinning around the robot in the opposite direction to Sonic, albeit only slightly. We get that sense of being equally as disorientated as the robot, and yet the shot is also very followable, balanced to a perfect degree. And just as quickly leaving the robot in the dust, not even destroying it. Sonic was literally just playing with him. All it does back there is fall over. And now he's speeding along through all the others, destroying them with barely an effort. His hurdle isn't actually the robots, it's the distance. But this is all great for entertainment and especially momentum. Literally just running through, creating explosions at this point. This is business mode. We're now circling right around again, a full 360 from the start, and the camera is left in the dust as Sonic trajects away from us, completing the final thread that is this sequence. Only scraps remain as he shrinks in the distance. This was all a collection of small sequences spliced together with one central motif. The camera doing a full spin as Sonic closes the distance, as well as a toward and away shot. All since that has been one big oneer of a shot. Easier to do with animation, sure, and with plausible hidden cuts tucked in there too, but it still makes it a great set of cinematography. And that's just this scene. The cutscene continues. And with all that, it's finally time for a proper cut. A robot from the sky, clearly a noteworthy opponent. And it is. We briefly and clearly see Eggman within it, impossibly up front to the camera. Another helping hand of animation there. And immediately in the same shot, contributing to the action with Eggman's mech swinging around his arm into a machine gun, and the camera swinging back with the action now that he's established. Eggman shoots the floor recklessly, willing to destroy anything to get Sonic, as well as giving us a trail of explosions to ogle over and guide our eyes over the frame for the next bit. Cut to Sonic, effortlessly hopping over these explosions we just witnessed, not losing any momentum, coming out of his spinball to express some focus, silhouetting in front of the next explosion and jumping high and out of the frame. A skill level beyond this bump of a hurdle. And Eggman too looking stunned upwards. Even he is still stunned by Sonic's ability. Not necessarily because Sonic has gotten better, but more likely because this is a cartoon and Eggman is meant to be beaten. Underestimating Sonic for that easy loss.
You little...
As for Sonic's actual attack, he starts by spinning in place close to the camera so we get a moment to help us see what's happening, with Eggman's teeny tiny mech in the distance looking so insignificant, followed by a brief first-person shot to know what it really feels like to be Eggman, I guess. And then we follow Sonic again, in bull form bouncing underneath the robo before running up the wall. The camera follows. We see Eggman cartoonishly turn, the camera pulling back to reveal all the more missiles. Same technique as the first bots earlier, which promptly fire off. Camera continuing to follow right up close to the camera, like a great 3D glasses effect, even swerving in front of the lens. Cut to Sonic's mid-shot expression. For the first time, we see his thoughts. Turning behind himself as the first real threat comes his way, though his response is pretty simple: go faster. Really stretching his face as the air pushes along him. Eggman is in full assault mode now, just firing indiscriminately upwards towards the hedgehog. And with Sonic running along the ceiling at this moment, we get to see the missiles following along from this further pulled back over the shoulder shot of Eggman's robot aiming across the frame. Camera swerving overhead as Sonic improvs his own loop-de-loop essentially. But Eggman stays on target. And now we're right up in the action, explosions right on top of Sonic. It's very intense as it feels so close. Sonic stops and jumps over, squashing and stretching at every opportunity. The camera then stops so Sonic can run into the distance once again. Only a handful of missiles remain, and explosions obscure our view. Camera shaking with each boom for added effect. Sonic has escaped the audience, and in turn Eggman as a hurdle. Sonic never kills him, just his inventions, or knocks them down sometimes. Always been a support of organic life, one way or another. Oh, except we get a close-up on Eggman's missile launchers again, just so we can track them easily as they assimilate into hands. Not just a cool battle, but also playing with the cool concepts for robot designs. This is entirely original to the cutscene. it's not in-game anywhere, though I guess it kind of is like the Egg Dragoon, but not really. Just pure, unadulterated creativity with this robot. Pulling back for a sec so our eyes can adjust before shooting past the camera and into the distance we last saw Sonic.
We're not getting away!
And now we get the opposite shot. Another hallway at some undetermined distance away. Missiles still flying as Sonic runs more freely. Look at his lanky strides. No longer in business mode, he feels he's won. And it tells a lot about his character. That smile on the side of his head says it all. And then the hand comes flying out from the mess, genuinely terrifying how well it swarms, right on pace, but pauses just in place for clarity. And Sonic is caught off guard, for once expressing concerns the battle is turning. Very briefly, because it is. Being swooped up, obscuring all the blue from the shot. Sonic actively losing? Talk about drama. And just as quickly, Sonic is yoinked back down the hallway impossibly fast, with us seeing some of the mechanics of Eggman's work. It's a simple towing system. For the mechanics in the audience who want to see some realism, I guess. Before guiding our eyes back to Sonic's resting place and Eggman holding a victorious fist. The action stopped and it's a face-to-face and over the shoulder. The music now stripping down to just basic drums and a single flute. But the camera zooms through the glass and up to Sonic. Still no dialogue exchange this whole time, mind you. Sonic struggles, smiles, and uses the suddenly appearing Chaos Emeralds, a great Deus Ex Machina that makes sense in universe, and it surprises audiences who wouldn't have had the knowledge that he actually possesses these just yet. Eggman gets his high-quality reaction shot and Super Sonic explodes onto the screen, and in anticipation, the camera pulls away preemptively to get that wide-angle shot. Eggman's hands attempt to grip the new glowing lights, briefly succeeding before... the robot mech now fully disarmed. We as the audience get a pause to take in Super Sonic's new form, as well as a swelling of a victory motif from the soundtrack. Before bursting through the chest of the new mech, charging out some energy before and then flying away in the distance. But circling back this time, no longer here just to get past now. Eggman, of course, retaliates in his cowardly ways, revealing the iconic Eggmobile, now with blooming textures. Dismantling himself from the mech, needing a moment to calibrate the jets before zooming off into the distance. What a great little detail that is. But now, in the air of hallways, Super Sonic comes blazing towards the camera, giving us this close-up shot with the air resistance pinging at his face again, before spinning around him and zooming just as fast down the hallway. Moving on, Eggman's accelerating through this unique hallway, with tactical ring lights every so often to help identify the speed of this commute, like white lines on a marked road. And with Eggman outrunning the frame, we can focus on those lights, their doorways being shut by an emergency sequence. Only for Super Sonic, of course, to come blasting through with a plume of explosions following behind him, and then zooming out to show the true scale of destruction, taking the whole damn fleet down in one fell swoop. And Super Sonic effortlessly flies past the lens as we get to witness, uninterrupted, the place fully breaking down. Victorious orchestra in full swing. And for more explosion porn, we then get another airship, Super Sonic flying past as we see literal fireworks going off everywhere, and explosions continuing along the deck span. Other ships are also there, this is a fleet, firing haphazardly in Sonic's general direction as we come to a calm. A lone tower with spinning capsule pieces, our next location. A static, albeit giant one, judging by the tiny speck that Eggman has become at this point. Insignificant against this scale. Way different to Super Sonic, so much closer to the camera, and with a lingering golden trail to boot. Eggman now reduced to a frantic mess. His previous calculated acceleration from that last hallway now dissolved into a mad dash, stumbling as he hits the walls on his way in. Very satisfying. Before finally ejecting him out of the thing entirely, falling beneath the frame as we see only smoke. And now we see his fall, eating the floor all the way into the background, his Eggmobile landing with a resounding thud. And in the foreground, Super Sonic vents. Now a low angle on Super Sonic as he holds all the power in the scene, and a zoom on this handheld shot like a spectator on the ground. Finally, it's time for dialogue. Just two guys hanging out in a room. Eggman right looking left, looking up. And keeping that power, we get Sonic's point of view, floating down to a groveling Eggman, stancing himself as vulnerably and apologetic as possible. Universally recognized, but distinctly a Japanese thing too, as this is Sega we're analyzing here, a Japanese company. As Eggman pleads his case, we come further to the ground before Sonic's foot takes over a third of the frame, still holding all the cards, but in the composition rather than the camera angle, and his aura overlapping the remainder of the frame too. Ending on Eggman again clasping his hands together above his head as we see more of Sonic's lower half, but still not even his face. Dramatic, but it's all cooling down as the music also comes down with Sonic to open up for the diegetic sounds of the scene, the dialogue.
Really? Look, go easy on me. I'll turn over a new leaf, I swear.
And Sonic responds. Rarely do we actually see Super Sonic not dashing in the air, so this is actually kind of refreshing. Plus, the background view of the window out to space is also just super satisfying. There is an argument to be made here about the camera moving in this shot for no apparent reason. I remember an old video essay complaining about early Marvel movies doing this, but I don't mind it. It just looks nice to me, even if there's not much of a purpose. There's been plenty of purpose elsewhere in this cutscene up to this point.
Well, this is new. Showing remorse, Eggman?
And with Sonic and his cocky ways, pointing with a smirk on the side of his face, we see Eggman's expression right up close, changing from a grovel to an evil grin as he reveals a button right in our faces, and pressing it in a very over-the-top manner for that cartoony goodness. Time for more mechanical mechanics. Eggman's twist is revealed, ending on this pullback shot as Sonic is surrounded and just as quickly halted as the camera spins around this circular device. We see the rings grip him to the center, and though Sonic has most of the frame here, he's struggling. And just like that, Eggman now regains his power, physically standing up and being levitated all the further, rising above as he now receives the low-angle treatment, able to give out his true evil laugh unrestricted, while Sonic is completely restrained. And finishing it off further with some zaps. Sonic holds on, clearly in pain, but attempting to push through it. You can really see how determined he is as a hero. And this is an ungodly amount of expression work, the likes we've never seen with Sonic before, really telling us all his thoughts and personality through his face. And screams, weakening for a moment before we pop out and Sonic loses his gold. Eggman on looking like the mad scientist he is. And an extra close-up on him, content as the light flickers on his face. Here's that tower again, now positioned much less peacefully and more phallically, revealing it's just another weapon, opening up like Eggman's space weapons tend to do. The music's back, but all evil and ominous, building. Sonic now not even given the whole frame, in a pseudo-censored kind of way. We don't see the full body as it writhes in pain, but in a way, not seeing some of it seems to make it worse as our imagination fills in the gaps. The Chaos Emeralds planted in the foreground orbiting Sonic to show the power is being drained away from him. And cross-cut with more mechanics unfolding, multiple elements of Eggman's plans all coming together at once. Sonic turns towards Eggman, though it's also directly at the camera, the last piece of resistance. Also, here's that face you've seen in thumbnails years ago. Seriously, this is another one of those images that's just everywhere. It's pretty haunting. But a big W for the animation studio behind the cutscene, right? And actually, probably one of the most mature canonical story elements in a Sonic thing. Maybe? The tower has now become a skeletal gun, aimed at the nearby planet established at the start, as Eggman laughs fulfilled, saying his exact feelings, cause this is still aimed for children.
Oh, I've waited a long time for this.
Evilly rubbing his hands and all, before doing the biggest button press of all time. We see the energy build on command and come blazing past the camera as it tilts to look down towards the planet. Destructive enough to outpace the cam, and also giving us this full wide angle of the same moment. Technically, this is going back in time a tad to really sell the effect of the shot. A similar thing happens, again, in Eastern representations of fight scenes, where a hit is shown multiple times from different angles to really exaggerate it. Some more subtle than others. The hints of Eastern inspirations do continue to lurk in the background of this work. Anyway, this beam is a planet killer, gently making its way to the surface innocuously before revealing its true power and how it wipes out any clouds in a massive vicinity. and the music is almost just saddens. It's not crescendoing here. This isn't the final move. And for reference, we get our very first shot on the surface of this planet and the massive turbulence it's making in the ground, causing a shockwave that disperses the atmosphere, or at least drains it of its color. Though even here, I feel it's a little downplayed. The clouds aren't missing, and that gust of wind at the end, that's nothing compared to this. But anyway, our evil man is now giving a unique pseudo point of view with this close-up on his glasses, reflecting his perspective of the planet in his sights as he looks on in anticipation. God, I have these long sentences. Back on the surface, we get a digital drone shot of a beautiful sunset as the ocean actively cracks beneath us, before pulling up to show more of that scale. Magma glowing deep below the cracks and interspersed with this new liquid tentacle thing. The planet was a cage, and this new creature was Eggman's true goal. And as its reach grows further from the cracks, it ends with it reaching towards that very sunset. How poetic. Also a point, it didn't have to be a sunset when this occurred, but the creators knew it would look better that way. A simple, conscious decision, again, makes such an improvement. So of course it went with that spectacle. Even Eggman is impressed, but just as gleeful. Look at those teeth. The scale of this monster increases, now giving us this wide shot to get a glimpse of its true size, though still not all too recognizable as a shape fully just yet. And hey, it's been a while since we've seen Sonic. This quickly became an Eggman story for a while there, and he's looking hopeless, down on his knees and all, practically gripping the floor. He looks angry. The beast now developing a kind of lanky hand that grips the planet, meanwhile Sonic 2 is gripping with his hand, his fur darkening and his gloves no longer of use. First we see his claws and the rest of him blurred by the narrow focal length. This is what the music's truly building up to. And the beast's face has now formed into view? Maybe? It's intentionally kind of complex to view thanks to it basically being a final boss spoiler, but it's big. It has spider legs, tentacles, and hands. A real amalgamate. But just like it, we next see Sonic's face, his teeth extending into fangs, and the music reaches its real crescendo. Sonic's theme, now in minor key. Camera pulling right out into that roaring shot, fur flowing in the non-existent wind, just as Gaia does the very same thing. Now those features I can recognize. Sonic and the monstrous Dark Gaia are intrinsically linked through the cinematography. The camera pulls all the way back to give us a full view of half its body. A bright white light behind it as a lens flare effect that continues to both light and obscure it, and seemingly the beast's form is frothing a tad throughout. And as an explanation, the Chaos Emeralds are shown again, drained of all color, shown to us earlier to be a reference point for this moment. And they too fall to the ground as we see Sonic's werehog stage first from behind, panting out of exhaustion. His shoes more spiky now, but that's more of a character design thing than cutscene. And then next is a silhouetted mystery again. We only saw him briefly before, obscuring half the frame as he's the anomaly of Eggman's resounding success. But he doesn't notice.
Success! A brilliant success!
We see his perspective, having Sonic in shot only briefly as he's distracted by his real goal. Looking up out the window, the camera tilting to mimic him, as we now see a single piece of the planet is plucked off, and underneath, the growing magma and occasional watery tentacle. And in true kids film fashion, Eggman exposites his plans.
Now I just need to harness its power. Eggman Land will finally come to be!
It's just a battery pack for him. He may be threatening and evil and even torturous, but he's stupid. Through and through. And now it's Sonic's retaliation. His new form still obscured by a dramatic pose and tactical shadows. The lighting putting in the work rather than the camera now. His eye glowing red in the dark. His voice deeper, more mature than before. And finally, we see him in the light.
Sonic, that's a good look for you. Festive.
Honestly, this feels like one of the biggest burns I've ever heard Eggman say. It's harsh. Again, Sonic gets the dark part of the frame, now a quarter as Eggman is the one speaking. And with one final twist,
So long, friend.
and a mention of friend implying that their history together is long, Sonic is shooed out the airlock, the camera following him as he grips close to the foreground, reaching with his other hand before He's flung into the distance, music also letting go. Another view panning with him as he scales along the tower's shaft. Chaos Emeralds as well, established they're still gonna be relevant from here as we get a close-up of Sonic struggling and succumbing to the drop. All with one final perfect sound to cue it all off before the logo. Damn, what an opener. That is unbelievably good. There is also one bonus shot. It's just a static shot, fully widened to show Dark Gaia evaporating away and spreading across the lands, but that's more story and not too special. This scene just astounds me. Plus, starting your plot on a loss is just so enticing as you have to work your way back up. Having the power struggle constantly switch within a battle and also having it lit and choreographed so beautifully just all comes together in this wonderful mix of cinematographic art. The momentum of it all maintained, making it feel fast by being scarce with the slow-mo, showing character in the action sequences, and the music being a perfect accommodating factor to it all. Sonic 2, the movie, wishes it could be as good as this. There's a reason Marza Studios have been in charge of so many Sonic cutscenes, though to be fair, the original film did have Sonic somewhat lose right at the start, so elements are somewhat there. Perhaps the new movie will take on more similar elements this time around, with Eggman being more Eggman-y this time. Maybe he'll actually have the strength to cause an even fight some of the time, rather than being 100% trounced at every turn. But that's for us to find out when we actually see the movie. Am I really making a fourth Sonic video this year? Apparently! The scene that changed Sonic 2, and by that I mean my favorite scene, really. Or one that's worth breaking down, because by a pure miracle, the Sonic movie franchise is probably the most successful game adaptation for the big screen. And the sequel only got better. So the scene we're tackling from this 2-hour, 2-minute runtime of Sonic 2 is the Master Emerald conflict scene. After all, this isn't just a classic fight scene and Knuckles' iconic storyline, it is full-on an actual adaptation of a Sonic level placed in movie form. So to give some context, this movie brings out a major MacGuffin with the Master Emerald. Eggman wants it, Sonic wants it, Knuckles is also there, and he's currently on Team Eggman due to, of course, being tricked from meeting Eggman first. But where this Master Emerald actually is on a mazy labyrinth in the middle of the ocean. Not exactly something we've never seen in cinema before from any standard treasure hunter movie, but surprisingly for Sonic is really, really fitting. And all these old relics of the ancient Echidna race clash in beautifully with all those temple-like levels in 2D classic Sonic games. I'm talking Labyrinth Zone, Mystic Cave Zone, a little bit of Lost World, and maybe the Pyramid Cave from Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, the temples of Sonic Unleashed. Sonic's been to a lot of temples, alright? To the point it almost seems natural, and the movie trope elements of it can help with adapting a kind of hybrid experience of the two. Sonic, in getting there, is shown sprinting along the surface of the ocean, which is just a really cool headcanon on an approach to any level. I liked it in Incredibles, it existed in Frozen 2, and here it really feels overwhelming and scary, what with his fear of swimming. Is that established? Am I thinking of Sonic X too much here? And then once on the inside, there's all sorts of booby traps. You got fire geysers, shots of arrows, killer spikes, all of the archetypes of a classic platformer, but not in a way that's 90% of the scene. More like a nod to a little bit of everything, which for a narrative is pretty important to water down.
That's no good.
You know, there's a scale to how heavy-handed and accurate you are, you know? And speaking of that narrative, while Sonic has just seen blazing past every obstacle that darts his way, here's Eggman and Knuckles just kinda cheating the system. How very them.
Work smarter, not harder.
Until we reach the big main Emerald Room, whereby Eggman is about to enact his big betrayal. Now apparently with a taser. Interesting choice. Only to be interrupted by the blue blur causing a stir upstairs, with a little shaky, unfocused POV cam for added uncertainty. Until he properly falls through the brick. Not sure where this fits in the 2D platformer experience, but hey, he's here. And I could totally see this pose as a 2D sprite, but maybe I'm just getting too into this. And so, it's Knuckles versus Sonic, shown out wide in a profile shot too. Nice. And as Sonic stands between them and the Master Emerald, he charges up to go for the Emerald instead. Smart hedgehog. And now it begins. Something that is really nice to see is how all these anthropomorphic characters just intrinsically have the ability to speed along. Plus, the luminescent trail they bring helps to really follow what's happening on screen. It's just a great executive decision that really helps build the execution of every action scene. As Sonic sprints up the middle of the stairs, Knuckles goes for the stalagmites, and hopefully in this reality he doesn't get stuck.
I can't get off! What is this? I can't get off! What?
Sonic does do the same, mirroring him on the frame, but only in a bounce, keeping in character. And it's all building up to that money shot. RGB. This is somebody's desktop background. Yeah, and then the other money shot. Yet another poster design before pulling out into this spinning camera shot as the two abandon all physics and fist fight in midair. Knuckles has harder hits but less accuracy, and Sonic gets his legs involved occasionally, culminating in a bounce-off rebound. Eggman is also there the entire time, scheming on the ground floor. You know how it is, it's Jim Carrey dancing among a flashing light background. And with one well-timed punch, Sonic is completely disarmed and rolls into the water. The Master Emerald is ready for the taking by Knuckles. Hey, you ever wondered why Sonic didn't use his super speed like all the past action sequences? Well, here it is now. Continuing the in-game logic that any boss gets stronger the more you beat them down. First glowing from behind the waterfall with just a great ominous shot, before blasting out the stairs beneath Knuckles' feet, and going so fast he's literally falling in slow motion while he darts across the entire ceiling surface. What a horrifying sight from Knuckles' perspective, but a really cool time to vouch for an over-the-shoulder shot. And ending it off with Knuckles practically frozen as Sonic spin dashes directly down onto him, grinding through the ground with his back rather than his claws. Victory. Never mind. By the way, subscribe. And that's a point. I think this action scene in general does a great point of keeping you on your toes. There are several points where the fight could have ended with a winner, but it just keeps going. I thought they used all their money shots earlier, but apparently not. There's still room for more, like this Sonic X smear frame of a punch sequence from Knuckles. And after all of that, Sonic has been slowly and systematically taken further and further away from the Master Emerald. First as a barrier, the floating above it, the in front of the stairs, and now opposite the room, opening an opportunity for Mr. Man to enter to the main stage, doing his eccentric thing. Also, I don't know exactly how they did it, but especially in cinemas, I fully accepted what I was seeing as real, because when you think about it, surely this scene is just entirely green screen. Yet somehow the visuals of full-flesh human beings somewhat fits into the aesthetic enough to not pull you out of the illusion. It's honestly impressive how far CGI has progressed over all the decades. But with him there, the fight sequence has officially reached its end as the narrative comes back in. Sonic spots the betrayal first, between the legs of all places. Interesting choice. And has to convince Knuckles he's being tricked.
Robotnik's stealing the emerald!
What kind of fool do you take me for?
Just gotta somehow get him to turn for... okay, I guess that wasn't as hard as I thought. And from then, it's your classic Eggman-Knuckles conflict. And in what form does it take this time? In something like Sonic Adventure 1, it went a little bit like this.
Way to go, Chaos!
Changing shape won't scare me.
With Best Show Sonic X, they handled it like this.
You liar!
And when it comes to the 2D games, yeah, I don't know what I was really expecting there. But with the movie, it really boils things down. It's aimed for a younger, newer audience from the Sonic fanbase, so instead, it's all about friendship.
You are my friend!
And so, Eggman obtains the Master Emerald, glowing with shocking green energy. I'm sure if there were 7 of them, he'd be juggling them to and fro. But instead, he vaporizes, now getting the ability to teleport and take down the temple with it. This is something I kinda wish Sonic games did more often. The escape from catastrophe sequence. I always loved the running explosion fests you occasionally get through some games. No better time to start than the present, as now everything's crumbling. The Master Emerald is no longer stabilizing the land, but better to crumble within the sea rather than on top of it. But it does lead pretty nicely to Sonic's biggest weakness, water, with it gushing out from every rocky orifice. But while he can escape with a little intuition, Knuckles isn't so lucky. And you know where this goes. Knuckles is pinned under a pillar, his last breath bubbles away, and Sonic has to cement his alliance by saving Knuckles whilst out of his element. I like how Sonic uses a rock to reach deeper into the waters. Also, another great reference, Sonic regains a little bit of breath whilst underwater in probably one of the most creative ways that really has no copy in movies after all these years, by breathing in a local giant bubble. And where was that mechanic first established in the games? Sonic 1 Labyrinth Zone. They get the strength to lift it a little, Knuckles swims himself to the surface as Sonic now is taken out by his inability to swim. You've seen the games, he knows how to run, and that's a nightmare underwater. And the scene finished off with Knuckles returning the favor with a hand. From there, we cut to the beaches, get a proper nice heart-to-heart with a beautifully rendered Knuckles. Seriously, I love the visual aesthetics this movie chooses to take. Sunset lighting and all. And the iconic second friendship is eternally established. And just like that, with a little bit of spinny cam, 2D cinematography, classic gameplay obstacles, and Jim Carrey in front of a flashing light, this movie acts to perfectly find the hybrid between familiar movie tropes and direct Sonic game connections, and coming together to create a brilliant, true-to-heart Sonic adaptation. It's not breaking boundaries in ways of narrative, it's a story arc seen many a times, but with it being a fresh restart to the world of Sonic and making sure to cover each character correctly, this is a brilliant representation of how the plots go, and doing it right too. There are other scenes that are highlights of the runtime, Knuckles on the beach, Knuckles' first reveal to Sonic, maybe Tails and Sonic dancing if you're a fan of that kind of thing, but this one I think best encapsulates the essence of what this movie was going for, and it's got some pretty good desktop backgrounds in there too. Though if it's like any other established Sonic universe, give it a couple more installments, and it'll just start getting weird. Swords, werewolf, Iblis. At least we got one more classic tale to tell. Wonder if they'll ever delve into Teen Chaotix, and do it well too. I guess we'll just have to see later on. For now, that's enough Sonic for this year. Yep. Nothing else Sonic related for another couple years. Shame we have to wait so long for another Sonic related thing. Ah, well, I guess I can wait. You know, oddly enough, these Sonic movies are probably the kind of films that I have been most enjoying as of recent years, and it's probably because I don't quite put it on the same status of heights that I expect certain animated movies to be. This trilogy very much likes to go into just being big old love letters to fans with way too many references, and I absolutely lap it all up. And though I found the original Sonic movie to be kind of bland and kind of safe, the second movie did a whole lot better with far too many references, and the third one now adapting this Sonic Adventure 2-esque storyline, I was genuinely really hyped for this movie. It seemed that in all corners, Sega and Paramount finally worked out what exactly it is that Sonic fans were hoping for, and were just going ham on showing everything. And to be honest, there is so much from this movie I would love to just gush about. The whole initial sequence we see with Shadow is just immaculate. The way they use his abilities and translate it on the film, his whole sequence with the electric gun and driving a motorcycle all the way up a tower, all sorts of references to Chow Garden. Chow's in space in a poster. Is something going to happen on the 23rd of June? I wouldn't be surprised. Integrating the humans in a way that's not so invasive, since we're here for the anthropomorphic furry things, and doing it in a way that works pretty succinctly. And though it's different, adding all sorts of variations like a second Robotnik by making a full character out of the grandfather Robotnik is, I wouldn't say inspired, but you know, it's very, very good. There is so many references that I noticed and I enjoyed and was constantly leaning over to mention what references what as it went along, as it was clear that this was just one big love letter against all of the odds. And considering how complex and how many characters there actually are in the initial Sonic Adventure 2 storyline, it was quite well done in how they were able to warp it into a slightly simpler version with the changes they did make. You know, no longer do we need Rouge as well there, or Big the Cat running around in the background. They skipped the likes of the pyramids and the rocket that get people up to space in the first place, and instead just set it entirely in London for some reason. Why London? Is it a British evil thing? I don't entirely understand. There is no space colony arc this time, there's no giant walnut in the sky, it's just a crab robot thing. And Shadow's backstory had been changed in a way to make it a little bit more PG, a little bit more palatable, which is fine. No longer is Maria being shot directly by a human intentionally. They are being shot accidentally in an explosion caused by someone trying to save her from a bullet to the head. Okay, sure, fine. And there were other elements that they changed that I thought, alright, makes sense. We don't need the giant lizard final boss, I guess, really. Let's make him into a 1950s Godzilla reference instead. Alrighty then. And though the grandfather Robotnik was not nearly as, Jim Carrey-like as he is in this movie, I could actually sit down and kind of just switch my brain off and enjoy it for what it was most of the time. The laser sequence, I liked. I took a good bit of shutting my brain off. It was a weird blend of being a pop culture moment, but with a really old song, so it was simultaneously out of date and pop culture-y. Maybe that's what I want. A music choice that's not because of trends or any of it. Though, thinking about it, there were a couple of genuinely outdated lines, like they still made a joke about autocorrect in this movie somehow. And that's because, yes, this movie was never going to reach the full expectations considering how much hype was leaning behind it, and they made some intentional adaptations along the way to make things fit. However, for a brief moment in time, while I was enthralled pretty much the whole way through, I didn't feel like my expectations were exceeded beyond in any level. They didn't integrate the likes of Amy and Rouge in the background that wasn't revealed in the trailer or something like I was kind of expecting. I was kind of hoping there'd be like an extra layer to be like, wow, they really thought this together. Just introducing Shadow and Maria will do for a new movie, and I guess a second Jim Carrey, sure, don't need to overexpand it. But there was a moment when this movie lost me, because at the end of the day, this is still a Paramount production, and even recently for the Sonic IP, they kind of flubbed it with the Knuckles series. This is very much still aimed for an extra young audience, which is surprising, considering this is very clearly quite a dark story. Even still, for the most part, it did pretty well in making things PG, and there is way more from this movie that I like than I don't like. But there was one tiny piece towards the end of the movie that made me go, Maybe after saying so much that the people making the Sonic movie really understand Sonic fans and know what we're after, doesn't fully understand and have just lucked out towards this point. It was a brief moment, really. It was, of course, what do you know, in the final battle of the movie. Sonic and Shadow are facing off against each other in Super Sonic and Super Shadow form. Brilliant, absolutely adored that sequence, and also really leaning heavily on Sonic having an evil moment, which is an interesting direction for sure, the friendship and all that. It's a good PG version of the messaging, I guess. All the while, the two Robotniks are also beginning to fight against each other, because it turns out Grandfather Robotnik wants to shoot the Earth and kill everybody, and Robotnik doesn't want that because he's not that much of a madman. Sure, alright, well, you know, I'll take it, whatever he says. But in going against his grandfather, this new warped Paramount version of him, the first sort of red flag, it's not the end of the world, change is the way these two Eggman fight against each other. This Eggman adaptation through the whole movies has always been a little bit extra quirky. He's more Jim Carrey being given a task than he is Eggman, because they decide to turn them both into bug people. They have mantis arms and scorpion tails and bug wings, which I didn't necessarily think fit his character. I guess he is kind of a bug with the way he makes all these robot machines. It was very much, what a strange direction they decided to take for a fight between the two of them. It's not exactly gigantic robot legs, I guess, and it never would be. That's quite a, shooty kind of weapon. But even still, that's not even the main thing. For me, what it was how they ended this fight scene, because at the same time this is going on, pretty much all of the characters are scattered for different reasons. Sonic and Shadow are fighting across the Earth in super form, and they have what is admittedly a lovely moment of sitting on the moon quietly beneath the stars in a way that reflects Shadow's backstory scene with Maria under the stars. That's really lovely, and he goes and turns from bad to good in having that conversation based off of some of the thematical lines and messagings of the movie. Great, brilliant, cool. So Shadow changes sides. Okay, we'll keep a note of that. Meanwhile, Sonic has come out to this fight out of anger and revenge, abandoning his friends and his friendship to fight out of spite, much like Shadow did 50 years ago. He's got his own character arc to deal with, being different from Shadow. So at this time, Knuckles and Tails have just been left behind on Earth, knowing that Sonic has run away from them and has presumably gone to the Master Emerald to become Super Sonic and fight. How do they get involved in this final climax, you may ask? Well, they just sort of teleport in at the last minute. Our Robotnik is kicked out of the spaceship itself by the grandfather Robotnik, in a way that kind of reminds me of the opening of Sonic Unleashed. Don't know if it's intentional, but I certainly enjoy it. Oh, that'd be a great movie to adaptate. Anyway, another time. And then while he is flung out to space and you think he's dead, turns out Knuckles and Tails save him with a teleporting ring. Several questions. It's just a Deus Ex Machina, really. How did they know he was there? How did they get a ring there? Why are they helping him in this moment? Did he know that they changed sides? It just kind of comes out of nowhere. Fine. What's especially worse, it's the thing that honestly shook me back to this, like, critical lens of mine, is our Robotnik just goes out of his way. He whips out a supersonic quill that he had from his pocket, and he shoves it up of his own grandfather's arse with a farting sound effect that propels him into the sky and zaps him away like a bug trap. Immediately, quickly, he's killed with a fart joke. Now, I know this is Paramount, and I know they have an especially kidly audience they're gunning for, and every one of these movies has a fart joke in there somewhere, but to make the fart joke the final punch of the final bit of the trilogy movie that you've made is just a bit too far for me. It really ruins the tone, but especially, it's just a zip and it's done. The death, even without the fart sound effect in there, is just a little bit nothing. I guess it's because they don't really want to show a death. It's really lame, to be honest, after adapting this really good, eclectic and slightly dark story with a fan base that you know are absolutely rabid for all the references you are putting in there, to then just actually sit down and make us watch a fart joke for the ending is a bit... oh boy. But that's just me having a personal gripe, if anything. It gets further worse from there because, hey there, they can make it to the halfway mark of this video. Come along and subscribe if you haven't already to hear about new animated movie reviews of ours. Alrighty, back to the second half of our review of Sonic 3. It gets further worse from there because, hey, now we know our Eggman Robotnik is good. Knuckles and Tails suddenly knew. That's cool. Alright. The next thing that happens is the actual Space Colony arc, that's not called the Space Colony arc, it's just a machine this time, is still going to fire aimed at Earth. Cool, I like it as a final sequence moment, considering in the games the version of events is there is a rehearsal shot towards the moon and then there's going to be a shot at Earth. I was kind of not expecting it to go this way. Maybe that's a little bit on me, maybe it's a little bit underwhelming. Instead, what it is the gun's going to fire for the first time directly at Earth and everyone has to direct it off of Earth. Okay, sure, you'll never guess where it goes. The final solution beyond the fart joke quill is that Eggman ends up pissing on the moon. Now, I didn't really expect a Snapcube reference to be in there. At most, they could have said, I've come to make an announcement. But by this point, I had kind of lost the magic moment in that moment because this was spoiled in the trailer. This became a big moment online because they're actually adapting that scene, and this is just a problem with the Paramount marketing team, honestly. They have such a kidly approach that the trailer shows so much of the movie more than you realize. Like, the fact that the second trailer is all heaped up in the race of all the Sonic characters, that's the ending. That's, like, basically the epilogue of the movie. Why is it in the trailer like that? So then, you know, you're like, oh, well, now that I know that there's the pissing on the moon-esque moment, I guess that's the final solution. We'll skip to the end when we get to that. That's not a surprise. It's one of the most iconic Sonic moments of the entire saga, in a sense. After that point, you then have Shadow teleporting into the room where he then goes, oh, hey, Robotnik, what do we need to do now? But this is another problem I have. Every character seems to instantly know everything the audience knows. At this point, why do either of these characters really react as if either of them are on the same side? Robotnik shouldn't know that Shadow has changed his mind, and Shadow should think that Robotnik's still on the side of the Robotnik that just tried to shoot the Earth, you know? Instead, it just kind of becomes a happy-go-lucky, hey, we're all on the same side now because the audience knows it. It's a kind of dumbing down right at the end that I just think docks it points, honestly. I'm not exactly saying this was always going to be a 10 out of 10 or even a 9 out of 10, but there is a notable dock in my mind for just making it a little bit too unthought out at the very last second. It's a gripe that's going to hold this movie down in my head because why did they do it like that suddenly at the end, you know? It was going so perfectly throughout all the rest of it. Even though there was a lot of references that he didn't include, which is kind of weird. Like, why is it based in London again when we had so much of like a global experience in the original story? You know, San Francisco, the pyramids in Egypt, and the like. Or how's about the fact I don't even think there was a real song reference to City Escape. There was the kind of forced in line of No Flight or Movies on the Plane, I guess, and all sorts of references in other places. Shadow, I don't even think says Chaos Control in this movie. They make a joke that he's like, how you've got a catchphrase? You do, you could make a quip saying, hey, did you not realize you do too? But no, it's more like they were more interested in saying a quip about he doesn't do catchphrases because he's too dark than to do the catchphrase, which kind of, I don't know, would have been cool. But hey, at least the Chow Garden's in there. Maybe one day they make a game out of it and actually print some money that they could do. It's the kind of thing where I feel like maybe Paramount didn't know exactly what the fans wanted because they've made some weird flubbings in not including the most popular song in the soundtrack and one of the most quoted lines from Shadow, their most popular character. Or maybe I missed it. I mean, that's valid too. I've only seen it once in cinemas. And even then, I had a crying child next to me the entire time. That mother just refused to not see what was going on in the supersonic fight scene, I guess. Now, while I have this gripe at like the middle of the final act moment, admittedly, it does then knot it back up again. It was interesting to see how they actually adapted the end of the Shadow story, because it's kind of a surprise to remember, but in the original game, Shadow does die at the end of it. It's just Sega and Sonic team learning, hey, we should really kind of bring this guy back to make all the more money out of how popular he is, that he is back in the future. So to turn it into Sonic goes through the same falling to the earth sequence that Shadow has in the game, but he's saved by his friends, is really, really cool. And having Shadow and Eggman doing a final sacrifice goodbye on the Not Ark and exploding it away, again, a very, very cool transition and adaptation of that story. Lizard not needed, apparently. And having Eggman do the I've come to make an announcement screen, but not because he's going to kill everybody, but instead he's going to save everybody, is a really beautiful, inspired choice. Presumably because Jim Carrey doesn't want to show up for a fourth movie as well. I thought in actually tying up that knot and finishing on those ends instead, oh yeah, that's a good way to end your story. Far less than a supersonic fart quill, if I may have that opinion. Although, if I was to say any critique about the real ending, God, they kinda cut to the end, don't they? Sonic team blast onto the planet, Stone kinda just turns away slowly and it fades off, and then we're like immediately on a very quick post-credit scene. It's like, alright, we made it to the end, but we're running out of time, go, finish, and they're done. And then it's like, oh, here's the race from the trailer you've already seen, call it quits. Fine, yeah, sure, a bit quick for my liking, but I wouldn't say that it ruined the movie. I wouldn't say this was a bad movie. I thoroughly enjoyed myself through 90% of this runtime, but it stumbled a little bit. It flubbed a little bit of the landing in a way that it's gonna be a gripe I'll always remember. There's a moment where you think Tom's meant to be dead, and then they kind of fake out that he's dead, but it happened so quickly in the epilogue, immediately after Eggman exploded, I didn't even notice they were building up to that fake out. Also, even on that front, how does Shadow know that it was the general that accidentally it caused the explosion that shot Maria and punches him extra hard because of it? His back was turned in the flashback. Like, how does everyone know what everyone did when they weren't even there? It's kind of a problem throughout this whole thing. A mild one, to be honest. I'm just a loud, shouty guy under a duvet right now. But, Sonic 4. Now this could line up to be some real high quality stuff. I was actually wondering what they were going to do with the future of Sonic, because I was thinking they weren't going to kill Shadow. He is clearly going to be the cash cow for the game, so why not the cash cow for the movies as well? No, he's dead now. And so is actually Jim Carrey Eggman? Crazy of a decision to do, but I absolutely adore it. It turns out in the post-credit scene, they are legitimately going to adapt a story with Metal Sonic. What? That's crazy. I didn't think that was possible. I didn't think that was true. That guy's before my time. That's crazy that they actually heard the fans in that regard absolutely perfectly, and they've got so many opportunities to do it in new, interesting spins. Of course, they adapted Amy Rose in there as well. Is that really a surprise? No, but I love the way they did include her, and I think could work really well with a new, original villain story with Metal Sonic. Far more than Eggman. Brilliant. It's not exactly going to be Silver the Hedgehog, and they can still expand with more sequel bait, like doing a future movie with Rouge. I really thought she was going to be in this movie, like as a secondary fluffy character, so guess long live the Sonic franchise, it can keep going from here. The fact that it is such a dark story being adapted, and it is Paramount going extra PG, Sonic is a child now, Tom is his father, there has to be fart jokes, and it's a little extra kiddly in a certain few areas and ways. It was always going to be not exactly the adolescent Sonic demographic that I was hoping it would be with an IP like Sonic, and throughout this movie, it did a damn good job of keeping me hooked and showing me references every now and again. Eggman's ringtone is the Eggman theme in Sonic Adventure 2, and then right afterwards, the big orchestra is the modern Eggman theme. I love that kind of stuff. A lot of the adaptations make some sense in a way that's not absolutely egregious. I can get along with it, and though I've got this little stumbling of a gripe in the middle ending, this is still an absolutely fantastic movie if you're a fan of Sonic. It is still a love letter nonetheless. Who needs "I've come to make an announcement" or anything more than that? And certainly against the likes of Disney's latest live-action soulless remake, this is the far superior project that I hope makes more money. I guess we'll see, but that's at least my reactionary thoughts and reviews on Paramount's latest Sonic 3. Long live Sonic 4. To be honest, I was half expecting it to end at the trilogy. What a relief, I guess it isn't. So, it's official, Sonic 3 has won Christmas. Or at least, that's what I would have said a couple weeks ago, during actual Christmas. I personally had a bit of bad luck where I was away for Christmas and New Year's and had very low internet, so I've kind of been on an accidental hiatus during that time. But generally, we all saw it coming, the industry somehow didn't see it coming, and now it's a reality. Mostly. Because you see, back when I was intending to actually make this video, I could say that Sonic 3 has not only outgrossed Mufasa the Lion King at the US box office, but it has almost doubled it. At the time, it had reached a franchise best of over $62 million, an incredible achievement for this kind of franchise. Meanwhile, Mufasa the Lion King has only managed a disastrous $35 million. For reference, the first one opened with $191 million. So yeah, in a sequel, we've gone from 191 to 35. It is not a good time to be an uncanny photorealistic lion, but it's a great time to be a cartoony CGI hedgehog, it seems. To have stuck with this franchise from that initial horror show character design to the studio listening to them and fixing it, to seeing each installment become increasingly more successful whilst clearly making the movies for you, to now seeing it take down a frontline Disney movie, it's been a truly rewarding journey. And it isn't a straightforward Disney failed story here either, though they aren't blameless here. It's also a story of Paramount absolutely knocking it out of the park at a time where you'd understand why they may have struggled. I've lost track of where the company's at now, but let's just say the corporate level drama has been a total mess on the Paramount front. The guys up the mountain needed a hit, and while Sonic can't give them their Top Gun Maverick numbers, they could still bring some much needed success. Sonic is what happens when you gradually grow and nurture a franchise, the extra money the first one cost to redo the design notwithstanding. Even if that rework initially lost the money, look how it paid off with them now with 3 successful movies. Imagine if Ugly Sonic happened at the current heads of Warner Brothers. We would have never gotten here because he would have been dragged into the tax write-offs. Sometimes, in order to make the big bucks, you need to risk some losses, and that's exactly what Paramount did. And you can make an argument that it's a symbiotic relationship in that it very well could be a reality that Paramount saved Sonic in the other way round. Never before has Sonic been more relevant and accessible to a general audience, and the games, they've been flubbing for a few years now. Sonic Frontiers was good and all, but, it's a franchise that's emblematic for its failings in a lot of places, despite being such an iconic brand, and this kind of revisit, as much as I hate the fart jokes in it, very well could be a new breath of fresh air that the Sonic franchise really needed, and Paramount can absolutely capitalize on. Meanwhile, Disney spent about $300 million on a prequel that no one really wanted. Whilst most of us here were ultimately unimpressed with the 2019 Lion King, there's no doubt it was successful. Until Inside Out 2, it was the highest grossing movie of all time. Still baffling that people won't accept that it's animated, by the way. I guess that's one compliment for the movie. However, just because a faithful remake of the original can do that, doesn't mean that a prequel with new music that, by the way, barely featured in any of the marketing, could do the same. Why do marketing departments hate musicals? What? It's Disney! It was a one-and-done success that wasn't asking to be revisited. Unfortunately, that is simply not the Disney way. And here they are now with egg on their face. Which should really be sending a message: it is time to stop the remakes. Okay, this one technically is its own thing, sure, but it evidently still stems from the same illness. I know they're filming the Moana one already, which, from the set photos of The Rock, looks really stupid already. And because that wasn't enough, of course, they've also announced a Tangled one, because now they're just fully cracking out the 2010 catalog. Like, they've soiled so many of their classics now that they're resorting to movies that aren't even 15 years old now. But not to worry, because they've also balanced it out with an awful looking redo of their first ever movie as well. I'm sure Walt Disney would be delighted to see his industry-changing achievement done with uncanny CGI dwarfs, sure. We really don't need more remakes, just stop after these last 3 that are already in production, and Hercules, I guess, is also coming around at some point. You know, I don't want to see you pump out 5 Frozen movies just so then you can have 5 more live-action remakes to tuck into. Not only are we all sick of it, but the box office is starting to reflect that too. A couple years back, The Little Mermaid did ultimately make money, but it was nowhere near the heights of the remake era, when you had Beauty and the Beast and Lion King heading over the $1 billion wall. Ironically, movies that are making $1 billion right now is the Sonic franchise in total. They've just passed that benchmark now that we're in the new year at the time I'm recording this, but I'll give you more timeline updates in a bit. But back to the Disney front, though clearly quality isn't something you're worried about, even you can't ignore just how bad some of this stuff has been. That Disney Plus Pinocchio should have really just stopped everything there. It doesn't work anymore, and you just need to try something new. Listen to the fans. Learn from the franchise that has actively taken on that advice. When you listen to the fans and don't overspend, you can have a successful movie series. You spend all this money on CG lions and most people aren't taken with the look anyway. They're instead flocking to the bright blue hedgehog with his huge cartoon accurate eyes with 2 irises in 1 eyeball. I really hope they learn from this, because a company like Disney has the resources to go into much more interesting directions creatively. Resources that clearly they just aren't willing to use. Imagine if they adapted a fairy tale they hadn't done before in live action, or, bizarre idea, created a completely original concept. I get it, they've done both of those before to some extent and it hasn't worked out, but it's not always gonna work out on the first go. Again, the first Sonic movie, they even lost Paramount money, but they played the long game and look where they are now. Sonic 4 has already been announced for 2027, and I, for one, can't wait. I can't say that these Sonic movies are the best in my personal opinion, but what they do deliver is a fun time at the movie theater and entertainment. It's solid entertainment for the Christmas season, and they understood that when putting it in this key slot. Even if Mufasa was great, I also just don't know if this was the right slot for it. The movie it's following on from was a massive summer hit. I just don't see if Christmas was really the place for it. Also, is it just me, or would this movie have been more appealing if they've done it in the universe of the original Lion King? Like bringing back traditional animation and doing the movie like that? I would have loved to have seen that. After completely soiling the company's 100th anniversary with Wish last year, it's a shame to see the 30th anniversary of Lion King suffer a similar fate. But alas, that's not the end of the news. That would be the perfect, Sonic beat Mufasa type story I could tell you back in the Christmas season, but there's a little bit more to it now, because when looking up articles of the actual box office success of both of these movies, so many articles are now saying Mufasa won this year, 2025, whoa! And it's all on a weird technicality. Basically, in the first weekend of 2025, Mufasa is ahead of Sonic, as if to insinuate Mufasa has been a slow burner, and Sonic had a much bigger opening. It still did, the numbers are still bigger. Sonic's total box office, or at least the latest figure I can find at the time of recording this, is $187.5 million. Meanwhile, Mufasa sits at $168.6 million. Bigger number, bigger success, right? But alas, because it's slightly faster this time in this, third weekend of the movies coming out, now apparently Mufasa's on top. Let's check out a Mufasa #1 trailer, Disney. Woohoo, yeah, let's pat ourselves on the back and not learn a single lesson. On top of that, the actual budgets of these two movies are massively different. With Mufasa sitting at about $200 million to make, that insinuates that so far the profits aren't even there yet. 168 million made, 200 to make. That's a negative number, not even probably including the marketing. And then you come round to the Sonic movie. That one cost $122 million. But on top of 187, what do you know? That's a profit. That is success. Now, this could be emblematic of all of Disney's failings, including the Pixar side of things, where their budgets are way oversized for what actual success turns around to be. But I get a weird, icky feeling when I'm like, I'm gonna make that video that I was meant to make a couple weeks back about Mufasa beating Sonic. Let's look at the news. And then I see practical misinformation. Yes, Mufasa is doing better this weekend, but it's weekend 3. That doesn't make it number 1 beating Sonic. Woohoo, let's celebrate. Everyone that's not Disney is trash. It's just a weird way to play around with statistics. But I will admit, it does show a closing of the gap. It's not that Sonic has doubled the success of Mufasa, just the box office opening was the best. And to be fair, I kinda get it. Everyone was more hyped for Sonic, but time has passed. We can find time to watch Mufasa afterwards as well. Sure. When it comes to the actual quality of these two movies, I still think Sonic is a no-brainer, as much as I've got my cynicisms that are apparently a little bit more controversial than I realized. But otherwise, in coming into the new year, these two movies clashed, and it's basically exactly how we expected, with a few weird talking points from the media. Whatever the case, it was an entertaining Christmas season to wrap off the end of 2024. So let's move on to all the many things that'll be coming out in 2025, and I'll certainly keep up with it too. And that's where we are so far. It is doubtless to assume that there will be more movies, not only because there's a post-credits of Sonic Movie 4, but also this is super successful. It's a success for both Sonic as a franchise and Paramount too, and I am all here for it. I may be cynical, I may not like some of the directions it takes, but I'm here as a fan that just wants to push it to be the highest quality it can be. I realize some of my takes are a little controversial, and I guess that's quite consistent with this franchise. I apologize. But nonetheless, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this compilation. Do share your thoughts or let us know about more detailed things about any of the movies you want to dig deep into. But otherwise, I shall see you all in a little bit.